well, nice contrast, nice light and shadow. Perspective needs to be improved a little bit. Remember that everything has to be connected and has to flow into the vanishing point. So probably the upper perspective is too horizontal. It should go down a little bit more. So it could meet probably the head of the figure, and you will have more the sense of being inside the street. So let's go for our artworks analysis. So the team of Breakpoint School has selected 3-4 works of full of you, and of course we don't have time to review all of them. That is why we are reviewing only some of them. Remember that these are not the best works, not the worst works, are just works that might help us to learn something from them and can apply to everybody, and are common mistakes that are repeated overall. So this piece is from Surana. Let's support her. So thank you, Surana, for sending your work and being brave. So you can also always show your love and your impressions of your work in the chat to encourage your fellow students. And about Surana, well, nice done between light and shadow, contrast. It's good. Maybe pay a little close attention for the verticals. Verticals are always really important, so try to keep the buildings really vertical, pay attention to perspective. And one thing about watercolor is that when we are working our shadows, we should do them in one go, because watercolor is not much forgiving. It's forgiving while it's still wet, but when it's drying, if we overwork, if we go one time and another on top, we're putting our washes on top when it's dry, then it starts to look too much overworked, a little bit dirty could happen. So I really encourage you to try to make your washes in one go. And if you have to make them more powerful, try to pre-wet your wash and work it while it's wet, so everything stays connected and clean. So in this case, maybe we have overworked our watercolor a little bit, but this is something that happens a lot, and it shouldn't keep you away to continue painting, of course. Okay. Okay. So what are you saying in the chat? Okay. So okay, don't worry. You can paint when you have time, of course, and there is no pressure to any of you. And you will have more time when the marathon finish, and you can watch the lessons whenever you prefer. So I think this is the second review. So Francie writes to us, sharing with us, I was confused because the reference picture didn't match the sketch. I hadn't seen the final work. Next time I'll be better prepared. Looking at my work, the building on the right is on a totally different plane. Okay, you can support this art as well, Francie. Well, let me say sorry. Sorry, first of all, because when I painted this work in the beginning, as I told you yesterday, the reference picture was much closer to the original final painting, but in this case I couldn't find this reference anymore. So the one that we used yesterday was the best that we could find. I understand that the lighting was not the same, but as I told you also on the first day, sometimes I try to improve the lighting, make it more dramatic, and reference is just that, a reference. Sometimes we have to make it improve, we have to make improves and try to make it more interesting for the audience as well. So about Francis' work, could happen the same as in the previous case. Shadows are a little bit overworked. It's really important to keep the washes clean on one go and to connect them all. So you should have the feeling that all the shadows are made in one go and connected within each other without too many cuts. Okay. Also, contrast could be improved a little bit more on the foreground, so we can have a little bit more contrast in that shadow that the wall is projecting. Okay. About perspective, it looked more or less good. It could be a little bit more steep on the plans, on the lines that we have above, so they should come a little bit more to the lower part, but the rest is quite good. And in this third case, we have a nice contrast between light and shadow. Maybe perspective, the sense of depth is not the best that we could achieve, because somehow the cathedral is coming into the building. We don't have this space between constructions. We do not have the sense of the street going till the end. So it's important to always leave space between our constructions, study all the drawing, look at the plans and how all this drawing interacts. Okay. So Filipa has done this for us, and we should encourage her to keep on going, of course. Filipa, so well done. Okay, so what's on now? Today's lesson is light and shadow in Villanueva de los Infantes. Okay, Villanueva de los Infantes, we already talked about this place. This is Castilla-La Mancha. This is in Ciudad Real. Ciudad Real is a province from Castilla-La Mancha. And now we're starting our third piece, Villanueva de los Infantes, Light and Shadow. So remember that you can find all sketches and references for each day in your personal account in the materials lesson. You can also grab them using the button below this video. Okay? So, are you following me? Please, I want to see how many of you are there. So, drop a plus in the chat and let me know if you are ready to start painting, and we'll get to it. I guess we have 10-15 seconds of delay. You're welcome for the analysis, no problem. Okay, so let's get started then. Okay, thank you for showing up. You are there. Okay, so we are starting our video. Reference picture on the left, beautiful reference full of light and shadow. You can see me on the right, and you can see the painting in the middle. So I guess we're gonna start with the drawing in a few moments, okay? I'll make a pause when the drawing is finished. And we'll see if you have any questions, and then we continue with our first wash with light and medium tones, and then we'll go with our second wash full of light and shadow and final details. Somebody's saying that the reference is quite complicated. Yeah, I understand. Anyway, we'll try to well, this picture is from my own. I painted this painting live. Actually, if you look at the reference picture and you make it big, you can see myself on the right. Not myself actually, but you can see my canvas. I made this on a big canvas. It was about 1.20 meters times 90 centimeters. It was a big painting. When we go on Paint Live on this kind of plein air awards or competitions, we normally paint on big formats. So the white canvas that you can see on the right, it's myself. So there are also other painters on the picture. There is somebody standing there in the middle, and yeah, okay, let's get started. So we're using Saunders waterfall painting. I'm turning it upside down, the block, because we're gonna see which colors we're gonna use today. So I have prepared for you a sheet, as we did yesterday, with the main mixes that we will be using for this painting. Okay, so let's wait for a few moments, and you can start. Okay, so let's grab a small sheet of paper. Well, not exactly a canvas, but it's a paper that comes on rolls. Paint paper are it's on rolls. It's like 1 meter 30 centimeters wide and 10 meters long. So you cut the shape that you need, and then you bloat it, you wet it with a lot of water, and then with staples you fix it to a canvas, to a wooden canvas. And you paint on paper. It's paper rolls. It's big paper. Mm. Yeah, don't worry. Mixes are. It's important to know the colors that you're gonna use. At least plan your painting a little bit, because since watercolor is really spontaneous, it's good to have a little bit of a plan. So when you start painting, you don't get too much lost. Okay, so the three colors that you see on the left, on the upper part, you can have yellow ochre. In the middle, you have burnt sienna, and on the lower bottom, you have cameo orange. Remember that all of them are from Rembrandt, but cameo orange is from Winsor and Newton. You can, of course, use your own brands. Okay, that's not a problem. I'm just showing you what I have used. And the darker color on the left is Van Dyck Brown, also from Rembrandt. So these are mainly the warm colors that we're gonna use. I think that we also used greenish amber as well. Greenish amber for the mixes. And now on the right, we're gonna see probably some cool colors that are gonna also be part of this work. So ultramarine blue, because it's a warmer color, and burnt sienna, as we did before. You already know this mix with these beautiful grays between ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Okay, but please avoid. I'm telling you, please avoid the mix between ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, and ultramarine blue versus cameo orange. Why? Because you end up with a greenish mix. Greenish mixes are fine if you want to put the trees in. If you wanna paint trees and the vegetation and so on, but normally we should work on warm colors for the first layer, and then use mixes between burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, Van Dyck Brown, or cobalt, or even transparent orange and ultramarine blue, but never put in yellow ochre or cameo orange for the shadows. Okay. Okay, so let's get started in a few moments with our actual painting, with the preliminary drawing. Apart from this, I think for the trees, well, I'll tell you later, but for the trees, we're also using a little bit of cameo yellow, and turquoise blue, as we explained yesterday. We mix them and we can create some nice green that maybe we combine with some earthy colors and so on to not having such radioactive greens, as I call them sometimes. Okay, my mechanical pencil of 2 millimeters HB. I'm gonna clean the screen. I have a small dot on the screen, so I want to be able to see well what we are doing. Okay, we are starting with the arches on the right, following perspective. Horizontal line is a little bit lower than the half of the height of the format. And we already put our vanishing point maybe 1/3 to the right. So remember this rule that we have been doing sometimes, not putting our vanishing point straight on the middle of the format of the painting. So already draw 3, 4, 5 arches. Try to make them correspond with the balconies above. You don't really need to paint them really detailed, but it's important that if you have an arch, you match it with a balcony above. So verticals need to be kept. Some of the balcony, some of the windows as well, and so on. Okay, we're gonna continue with the building on the back, the one that is facing us. But before that, we're gonna put in the tables that need also to match the perspective. Already drawing some chairs. Maybe they are too big. I have to make the tables a little bit smaller. But there are 2 rows of tables and some people sitting on them, some people standing on the back. And there is like a canopy, like a awning on top that also needs to match perspective. It's a little bit tricky because it's right in front of us. As you see in the reference picture, it's not exactly the same angle, but because the oni, the chairs and this terrace is a little bit more on the right, but that is more or less what I could see from where I was. As you see, I'm a little bit more on the right in the reference picture. Okay. Yes, I told you that the vanishing point is if you take the division between the walls of the building and the floor, when you have the perspective lines, they flow into the vanishing point. So we have drawn the horizontal line. You can see the horizontal line going from side to side, a little bit lower to the middle of the height of the format. And the vanishing point is there at the end of these onis of this terrace. Everything is coming out from that point. Yeah, the thing is that, for example, what I'm drawing now, the church on the left, it's on another angle, so it's got its own vanishing point. Vanishing points only works. One vanishing point only works when you have the same perspective for the buildings. What I mean is that if you have a street that is curving a little bit, it will have its own vanishing point, so you have to take that into account. Of course, the vanishing point of all the vanishing points. Imagine I am standing like this, but I am going a little bit to the side or more to the side. So all these are different vanishing points. But it's important that you know that all of them are on top of the horizontal line. So all are located on the horizontal line, but there could be different vanishing points. That is why we have 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, or multiple point perspectives. In this case, this is mainly 1-point perspective. Everything is going into this part on the right where the terrace is. But of course, on the left, we have the church that has got its own vanishing point because it's a little bit curved if you compare it to the rest of the picture. So we have drawn as well the building on the back with one balcony. Now we're going into some figures. Remember that heads need to be at the height of the vanishing point. If you look at the heads, the heads are at the vanishing point. That's important. Even if the figures are bigger, they need to be there. Okay, I believe we are getting to the end of our preliminary drawing. Maybe this is the most boring part, but we need to spend some time doing this because the drawing needs to be good for these kind of cityscapes. Okay, some figures sitting, some figures standing. There is also a, how do you say, server? Service, I don't know. Wait. Maybe I'm not using the right word. A waiter, sorry, I knew that word, I forgot. A waiter serving some drinks also on the left, okay? Okay, I put down some trees, also matching perspective on the left. Try to make them loose as well. Some more figures. Somebody sitting there as well. Figures are complicated, but we need to learn how to depict the main figures that we need to use. For example, I'm not the best in the world painting and drawing figures. I need to improve that. But for example, I get used to paint a guy standing with some movement, a guy from the back, a guy from the side, somebody sitting, somebody carrying something. So I have 4 or 5 figures that I need to use a lot, and I know how to do them. That's important. But of course, everything has to be improved. Okay, some chimneys, some now we're drawing some street lamps, final touches, details, or drawing. There's a bench as well. Okay, and let's pause our video here. So please, if you have any questions about the drawing process or the preliminary drawing, please let me know. Or you can say anything that you feel. If you want to feel, keep on going, drop a plus. If you want to ask anything, you can write it down. Everything good? Let me know if you're keeping up. Okay, I wait 10-15 seconds and I continue because I know that some of you are painting along. So I understand that I am a little bit fast. Well, in the meantime, remember that the drawing doesn't need to be too detailed. Okay, the drawing just has to help us to the actual painting process. Okay, and we need to put down just what we need to paint actually. Okay, grabbing my tissue to know exactly how much amount of pigment I need to put. Let's spray a little bit of water on top of our format, but we're gonna actually start with a dry paint pigment, dry paper. So actually the bucket of water is covered by our reference picture. But okay, you know what, when we are going there with a brush is because it's because we need some water. Okay, so first thing, the sky. The sky is not really blue here, so I mixed ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. I have put down the sky. It's a mix just in between of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, maybe a little bit more of ultramarine blue for the sky. And now we're putting down warm colors for the whole picture actually, because most of the architecture here is in earthy colors, ochres, yellow, oranges. So I'm just trying to be loose. I'm putting down burnt sienna, I'm putting down raw amber, greenish amber in the case of Rembrandt, and that's the name. Putting down some yellow ochre as well. So all the warm colors that we were explaining before, depending on the place, we're just putting it down and connecting them all together, wet and wet. So it gives you a nice start to paint on. Okay, let's keep on going. Yellow ochre, the camlin orange, raw amber. We're trying to leave out the figures, even if the figures are darker later. We don't know right now what we're gonna do with them, so normally I leave the figures till the end because maybe it's also helpful to leave the figures out, because if the painting is too light, we can add some dark for the figures. If the painting is too dark, we can leave some figures light out. So it's like you say a bonus till the end to help you with the composition. Okay. So a little bit of Van Dyck brown as well for the floor, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Now it's a little bit cooler, but the main scene, the whole main scene is warm. So we are using warm colors: ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little bit of Van Dyck brown, and we are trying to put everything together in this big first wash and make the white of the paper disappear. I think that's the main thing to do with the first wash. Make the white disappear, connect everything, and then on top you can start building your painting with a wet on wet technique, with a dryer brush, and so on. Okay, a little bit of burnt sienna. We're putting it on top of some of the windows because we want some different colors at some point. Now we're changing to Skoda Perla. Before we were using Da Vinci Cosmo Top Brush number 16. our bigger rounded brush, and now we're using is called a Perla number 14 because it carries a little bit less of water and it's able to detail a little bit more, because it's not in our interest to add more water to the format because the painting is already too wet. That is why I have changed my brush to a synthetic one that carries less water. Okay, some raw amber or greenish amber, and we are putting in some of the rooftops on the building on the background, and also on the part of the church on the left. Some parts of the paper are wetter, some parts of the paper are drier, but overall everything keeps on flowing together. Now we're adding our medium tones. Our light tones were already added with the big wash. Now we're trying to reinforce some of the parts or medium tones. Then we're gonna let it dry, and then we come with the shadows. The painting process normally, I always do it in the same way. The thing that changes is palette, colors, mood, color temperature, color density, but the painting process remains almost the same. So as I told you, reinforcing some of the perspective lines with denser pigment. Hope it stays there. It will disappear some of it because it's still wet, but the main purpose is to reinforce this perspective feeling. Some more burnt sienna because the previous wash opened itself too much. I'm reinforcing with a little bit denser burnt sienna some of the upper windows of the church and lower ones as well, starting to add some of the architectural features. Okay, I'm using my credit card. Well, remember that the paper format is 30 times 40 centimeters, because I believe that on the materials of the course you have 300 gram per square meter rough imperial size paper. That is the whole paper. But if we divide it in two parts, we'll have half of a page. And if we divide it in four parts, we'll have 1/4 of a page. So we are painting here in 1/4. We don't have time to paint bigger formats in one marathon like this. So it's always 30 times 40 centimeters. Of course, if you have time, if you feel confident, you can work on half of a sheet or even a sheet. That's not a problem. So here I'm reinforcing some of the inside of the arches, darkest part. Also putting out some of the pigment. As you know, brushes can be used to put pigment and also to take off some of the pigment. Now we're going darker, painting some of the under roof. Using my brush with a little bit of water to integration. And now we are starting to paint all these onis, all this upper part of the terrace, and I'm using a mix of burnt sienna and yellow ochre. So this orangish color is the one that I am using. Careful not to get a green. I believe that now we are mixing a little bit of, as I told you previously, a little bit of cameo yellow, a little bit of turquoise blue, a little bit of raw amber or greenish amber, and then we get this beautiful light green, and we can put down some of the first wash for the trees. Okay. If I want it a little bit more greenish, I use a little bit more of turquoise blue, a little bit now of Van Dyck brown, and mix it all together and wet in wet. Remember to make this wet in wet. I put down the shadows already of the trees to make it flow wet on wet. Wet on wet, sorry. Today I'm a little bit more tired, so I think my English could be worse than yesterday. Yeah, a lot of work, and it's already Wednesday, so Monday, Tuesday, everything starts tiring you, but we'll keep on going, don't worry. Okay, I'm spraying some water on top because I believe we have already finished the first wash. So let's make a pause here. So our first wash is ready. Light and medium tones, okay? Remember, light tones with a big brush. Medium tones with a synthetic brush, reinforcing some of the parts. When I feel that the painting is already dry or that I cannot add more information, then it's time to let it dry. And so we have used our hair dryer. If you have time at home, you don't need to use it. But we let it dry, and now we come with the second layer and we start putting our shadows in. Okay. Well, we had a break at minute 34, but you can already ask me, please, some of the questions for this first layer. We'll do another break in 8-9 minutes, but somebody's asking, just to understand, when you paint wet on wet, shouldn't you wet the paper first? Okay, interesting question. But the paper is already wet because I put down, well, in the beginning of when I start the painting process, I spray a little bit of water. Okay? This doesn't mean that the paper is wet on the beginning when I start. I just spray a little bit of water so the washes flow better with the brush. But when I'm using my my big brush, my Da Vinci Cosmotop number 16, I'm making big washes. So these big washes, connecting everything, connecting every shape on the painting, makes the paper wet. That is what I mean with wet on wet. I don't know if you understand. I have already made the big washes on the painting, so I have some time before this washes dry to add some details on top. And that is the wet on wet process. It doesn't mean that I have pre-wet the paper, but the washes with pigment itself give me some time to paint wet on wet. Okay, so that is what I mean with the wet on wet process. While the big washes are drying, I add some more details with a finer brush. Now it's dry, so now we can continue with the second wash, putting in some shadows and contrast. Any more color? Any more questions, please? Okay, let's keep on going then. Huh? You can ask why we paint, so that's not the problem. So let's go. So I have grabbed my Escola Perla number 14. I have pre-wet the paper a little bit on the background. Why? Because I want a soft brush stroke in the end. I want to create some mystery. I want to create some wet on wet effect for this part on the back. Because this wet on wet gives a little bit more of depth. But now I'm going a little bit more rough for this light and shadow work on top of the building on the back, okay? And now, with the same brush, we're starting to put down all the shadow work on top of the buildings on the right. I'm going with the Skoda Pillar number 14. You could probably use a bigger brush because this is a big shadow. So the bigger the brush you use, the better. Okay, now we are mixing a little bit of burnt sienna, greenish amber to make the shadows of the canopy. Or the ponies. I don't know exactly. Okay, leaving some of the light parts in the back. Okay. Leaving all these small stripes of light. Still mixing the same to make the left part. Okay, a few max to make this on the left. Ultramarine blue, Van Dyck brown for a dark color, and now wet on wet, I'm reinforcing the interior part of the arches, but they're really dark. Here we need to be bold and to get to it. And I believe with some kind of brush strokes more, this part of the right will be finished. We try to leave the lower part a little bit soft and open because we need to connect it with the shadow on the foreground. So now with a smaller brush, it's called a Perla number 8. We are reinforcing the lower part of the balconies, wet on wet. But because we are using a much denser pigment, mainly Van Dyck brown and ultramarine blue, it's staying where I want it to stay. Okay, this came in too much, so I'm putting out some of the water. Now I'm using my credit card. Remember my magical credit card? Well, a lot of watercolorists use it, I think. And we can also use it to punish the paper a little bit and try to get some of the whites back by scratching the paper. Okay, so I believe the right part is almost finished. Now I'm getting to the shadows of the balconies in the back. Reinforcing some of the darkest parts. And probably now it's time to get to work all these figures and the terrace. So something that we have to remember is light and shadow, how it doesn't really work. So I have put some shadow for lifting up these benches. Actually, the light should be hitting the right part of the benches, but the upper part of the benches is wider. That is why we got some shadow underneath. So we have taken now our Da Vinci Cosmo Top number 16, the biggest brush that we have, and we are starting to cut the difference between light and shadow on the scene. So when I paint a shadow, I always start with the connection between light and shadow. I try to make it in one go. It's important that the connection between light and shadow is done in one go, because then is when it looks clean. And then we cover the rest of the shadow. Okay, smaller brush now, because we are reaching, as I told you before, we need to understand how light works. So there are some surfaces such as the tables that are over there, that the upper part of the tables are reflecting the light. So we're leaving them under the sun. Not under the sun, but we're leaving them under a brighter color. Okay. Reinforcing some of the benches. Maybe where you're gonna use the water spray a little bit, so it doesn't look that stiff. You see, I'm using the water sprayer now to move the pigment around a little bit to make it look more loose. And now we are using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna to reinforce some of the darkest parts and the arches again. Okay, lifting up some pigment from the brush so it doesn't carry that much, and I can dry brush technique, making all these details on the balconies above. Okay, and now we're gonna continue, but first we need to do a small break. So does anybody have any question until now? Please let me know if you're following me, if you're painting, or if you're doing well. Any more questions about the painting process of our today lesson? Remember that we are in our second layer, putting in some light and shadows. Let's keep on going then. Okay, we can turn on the video. Okay, so here we are back. We are back painting. We were reinforcing our balconies, our doors, our windows with darker pigment. There is still some wetness on the right wall, so we are taking advantage of that last soft edges that we can create, but now we're going really bold and strong with denser pigment to put in some more detail. Okay, now we are creating some features on top of the arches, a little bit of dry brushing technique to put in some detail, reinforces also perspective. And now we are creating the structure of all these canopies, of these awnis, and also the lower part of the tables that are darker. But we left the surface of the table, we left it much brighter because the sun is reflecting on top, and we need to explain somehow to the audience, to somebody that is watching our picture. We need to leave that out to explain it, of course. And if we put everything dark, then we don't understand, and I would really have some tables over there, right? Okay, reinforcing perspective, some perspective lines, some pavement detail. Okay, we are going now with that dry brushing technique, putting in some details on top of of our painting. Forgive me for a minute, well, we keep on painting, but I'm looking for the actual painting for you, so you can see it live when we finish the session. So stay put there with us. Okay, here it is. I'll show you later. Okay, light and shadow work on top of the windows, of the main windows of the church. Smaller brush so we can create a little bit more detail. Van Dyck brown and ultramarine blue, probably. So I want a darker brush. But sometimes I switch to the bigger brush because I don't want everything to be too detailed. Sometimes I want a big brush stroke that brings in some energy. Okay, so I use my my water sprayer. I use a fast brush stroke with dry brushing and so on. And now we are going to go into some detail with the street lamps popping out from the wall and giving us this nice contrast on top of the sky. This is positive shape. Actually, watercolor works a lot with positive shapes, one on top of the other. The most difficult thing sometimes is to leave these whites, for example, as we did on the tables. But positive shapes are normally the natural way on how watercolor works. Okay, I'll also use my credit card to scratch out some lighter tone, using also my tissue to take off some of the pigment, because for example, for the tree branches and trunk, I want less pigment on my brush to be able to have a dry brushing technique. Okay, some shadows, some features on the back, lower part of the church, giving us also a nice horizon. Reinforcing lower part of this oni. And we are leaving the figures for the end, but we are getting to it. Okay, some dry brushing technique. Remember not to draw too much. I'm only drawing the main elements. Okay. I also use my finger to avoid detailing too much, and when I have too much drawing, I use my fingertips to destroy it somehow a little bit, to mix it. Okay, so we started with the figures sitting down, dark figures because they're inside the shadow, and I wanted to contrast against the lightest part of the painting, the background. So we have all these big shadow figures popping out, contrasting. Keep on reinforcing. Okay, raw amber or greenish amber. We want to change the color a little bit, and now we are painting some figures in the back, still contrasting against the sky. Now we're going for a more bluish pigment, and we are painting the legs of that person over there, but we are leaving the upper part of the body much whiter. Not every figure has to be dark. The one sitting here, of course, we are connecting one with each other and putting them darker because we want them to contrast against the background. So now we are with a waiter, some chairs and so on. Putting the tray. face of the figures, maybe some burnt raw amber, transparent orange, and so on. If I want a lighter face, I can use also bright yellow to make it a little bit earthy color. Okay, some of the main features on the window, some shadow here and there. Lifting up a little bit to connect with the tissue. Now we are cleaning our lowest part of the palette. And we're using Coming Orange. Why do I do this? Because most part of the lights are pretty the same. So I like to reinforce some of them. Now I'm going to use water to connect them. This also helps me to, for example, the figure that is in the middle with the white upper body. If we put a darker tone in the back with this Coming Orange, makes it pop out like in a negative shape. Now, you need to be careful with this because this is like glazing somehow, no? Glazing some part of the paintings, but it needs to be connected wet in wet, okay? Okay, some of the details here and there. There are some iron details, parts of the window and so on. Okay, now I'm taking some bluish gray with a little bit of tamarind blue and burnt sienna and trying to connect the shadows of the buildings with the background with a little bit of water. Yeah, but the good thing is not having to retouch our painting that much. Okay, so try to keep it simple. Sometimes we achieve this on a first go, but sometimes we need to reinforce it too much. Of course, it's much better if we can do it on one go. Okay, some of the chairs, darker chairs, and so on, elements, details. Bluish color for these benches on the left. Reinforcing so this canopy really comes on top of the painting. Okay, some burnt sienna now, more reddish color. Loose brush strokes, don't think too much about it. Now it's a thing. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Those, I mean, sometimes I feel like maybe we could draw or get a little bit fussy, less fussy in the end, but yeah, we try to connect everything. And while we are putting these details, we try to connect everything. And it's important to be able to connect all the shapes, even if you are putting detail. One important thing as well is not to make all the details with dark colors. Because we tend to draw a lot with dark colors in the end, but we can also use other kind of colors. Greens, of course, for the trees, more earthy colors, and so on. Okay. Using my nails now to scratch out some lights from the figures and the chairs on the table and so on. Okay, I believe we are reaching the end of the painting process itself, but soon it's gonna be time to add some opaque colors, bright colors that will give us more color, of course, and more brightness. Okay, so I'm taking Cameo Red Light. Rembrandt now, I think they only have Cameo Red. But I like better Cameo Red Light. So if you find it on another brand that is not Rembrandt, you can use it. They changed their watercolor chart. So the Cameo Red that they have right now is little bit darker. I like more the oranges feeling that it's still red, but it's little bit lighter and does pop out more. So I took a little bit straight from the tube there, Cameo Red Light, and I'm painting this top sign. It's quite nice because I mean, we have all these warm colors, oranges, ochres, and so on, and when we put in some red, it really helps for it really helps the watercolor palette that we have used, because it's in relation, it's all these warm colors that are in relation with each other. Okay, still grabbing again darker colors for some dry brushing for this terrace. Some signs over there, these kind of signs that show you where to go. Maybe a small bag for the figure, give them a little bit more of life. Reinforcing the heads of the figures, because we have an earthy color for the face, maybe a dark one, but we'll also put a darker color for the hair sometimes. Okay, now I am grabbing bright yellow #1 from Holbein. You see, it's a really powerful color that gives us this beautiful creamy yellowish color, almost close to white, but it's got this this ivory color. So I'm putting it in somewhere and there, reflections, light, and so on, using also my fingers to connect it. Okay, so I am putting it down where I need to. Try not to use it too much, but it helps a lot when putting in details. I have pre-worked a little bit the back, and now I'm putting some more figures to create this sense of busy street. So this was a decision making at the end of the picture, actually. But you see, I'm putting some figures, but as a group, I'm putting them all together in a big shape. I'm not drawing figure by figure. So this is really important as well. When you draw figures and you're drawing a crowd, don't put one person, like separate to each other. No, it's much better if you combine them in a big shape, because otherwise, I don't know, it doesn't look really nice. Looks a little bit amateurish, and also looks like, I don't know, like an army. Everybody standing at the same distance from each other. Normally, people work in groups, walk along on groups and so on. So it's better to connect them to each other. So less tone, and we put them on the back, and then they look that they really are walking at the end of the street. Okay. Okay, some wires connecting some parts of the street, left to right. I believe that in the recording we see too much the darker tones. Maybe it's because of the camera. I'm always talking about that it's really important to have dark tones, medium tones, and light tones. I feel like in this recording it's quite good, but some of the medium tones are not showing that much as they should, but they really need to be there. Okay. Okay, so we are drying our painting. I think it's quite finished. Maybe some opaque touch in the end is gonna be put. Everything is almost there, I think. Okay, so what I'm explaining here in this part of the video is that I don't like two facades of a building that have different on a different plan. Should never have the same tone. So I'm really glazing with a darker, really light wash the part on the right, so you can see the difference of one facade and the other one on the church. Okay, this nice moment when we finish and pull out the so we can see the white of the paper, and that's the final painting. So I'm connecting a little bit with my finger. Be careful with that. So that's it. Thank you everybody for being there, and as promised, here you have the painting. As I told you, dark tones, medium tones, and light tones all had to be there. Okay, so thank you very much for joining, and